Okay, so we're going to now add our lining to our exterior. So I've turned my exterior bag so that it's wrong side out, and I'm going to tuck my handles inside, and I'm going to tuck the flap inside. We don't want any of that showing, and I've just removed those clips that I'd left in. I'd left them in overnight, and you can see that fold is now kind of almost set in place, and that's fine. I'm going to take my lining, and my lining is right side out, and I'm going to position my lining in the bag inside with those pockets facing the side that the flap's on, because you want the pockets at the back, unless you want the pockets at the front, in which case do it the other way around. I'm just going to pop the lining into the bag. We do it this way around because the lining is smaller than the bag, because I like linings that fit perfectly. They are all smaller than the bag that they're actually going into, so it's easier to do it this way. Now, with that seam on your lining, you need it to be central on your side panel, and if you haven't marked the centre, then take a tape measure and actually measure the centre of that, and just pop a clip in just to hold that open seam centrally on the side of your bag, and do exactly the same on this side. This is what I mean about the seams that are offset, because the seams on the bag are on the corners and the seam on the lining is central. So I'm going to come to the corner, I'm going to open up my seam. Obviously I couldn't open this up before and press it because one side of it is faux leather, and I didn't want to press my faux leather because that would have been a disaster. So I'm going to open up this seam. I've got a little bit of foam there that needs to come out. Clearly I wasn't as diligent as I should have been when I was trimming out foam. You can always go back in and take a bit more out if you need to though. So I've done that, and then I'm going to open that seam. So now I've got 3 clips at that end, so one on each of the seams on the outside and one on the seam on the inside. I'm going to do the same at the other end, so I'm opening the side seams on the exterior of the bag, popping a clip in. I'm matching up the top edges of the bag and the lining as I go. So having got that all in, I'm just going to give that a little push, and if I pull, you can see that that top of that lining fits perfectly on that side of the bag. So I'm just going to pop some clips in. Let's just move the clips over here so I can actually see what I'm doing. Anybody who's thinking that's a pretty little clip holder, it's one of the poppet pouches. You'll find them free in the files in my group on Facebook, which is Bags by Bags of Style Pattern and Sew Along group. So I've got my one side on. I'm just going to pull this side, and again fits perfectly. Oh, forgot the magic trick. Open the zipper. Open the zipper on the lining and the pocket lining. It's not an absolute essential at this point, but you should open it now. It's easier to open it now than realise later that you haven't. Open the zipper. I'm going to say it one more time. Open the zipper before you do all of the clips and then stitch around the top, because then you will have to be unpicking or ferreting through the hole in the bottom of the lining. It's easier to do it now. So there we go. I'll just push that lining in. I have my clips all around the top, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch all of the way around the top of this bag to join the 2 pieces together. Let's just get rid of that. That's it. Now obviously I haven't got a flat bit, I haven't got a free arm, so I'm going to have to do this. I do this from the inside, which means it's difficult for you to see what I'm doing because the bag is big and kind of in the way. Now anybody that's thinking, oh, she's got extra duct tape on there, don't worry, that's an extra bit of duct tape because I put one of my branding badges on there. This is the bit that's on the back of the magnetic fastener. So I'm just going to push the bag under my presser foot and I'm going to stitch it around the top. I'm going to press it down so you can see what I'm doing. I hope you won't be able to see it properly because it is I am working kind of inside of the bag. Let's just reduce my stitch length a little bit. Seam allowances and what have you for all of this are all in the pattern, so do check the pattern because it's a really good habit to get into, to use both, not just the videos. So I haven't given you all of the details of everything as I'm speaking, just because I think it's a good idea, a good practice to get into the idea of using the pattern as well as the videos. I know some people love videos and don't like written words. I think it's great to use both. Don't worry about manipulating your bag. You've got foam in there and it will come back. You are in charge, the bag is not. I'm just going to drag it and pull it round. And as I said previously, for anybody that's thinking, oh, she's got a big old machine there, an industrial, this is not an industrial machine, this is a Husqvarna Mega Quilter, Husqvarna Viking Mega Quilter. So she's not actually a bag making machine really, she's a quilting machine. But she's doing okay with this, and this is a machine that I've borrowed because mine's in the shop, needing a new motherboard, But I don't sew on an industrial. I only sew on. I have my machine's a Juki. I don't sew on an industrial. So all of my patterns are achievable on a domestic machine. This said, if you've got a very basic entry-level plastic brother, you might struggle. But most reasonable quality machines and many vintage machines would manage these without any bother at all. So I'm just going to keep going until I've gone all the way around. Ideally, you want your stitching to sort of overlap by ½ an inch, I guess, just to. But you need to. You don't want one line of stitching where you meet to be up above the other. You want them to actually run into the same line. So, having done that, we're going to do the bit that nobody really likes, is removing all these basting stitches around the top. Be careful you don't take out any of the stitching that you've actually just used to join the two together. You're only removing the basting stitches. And you're going to take all of the foam from the seam allowance at the top of your bag. If you've used something like faux leather for your exterior and for your facing, you may want to trim down the faux leather from the facing down the seam allowance by about half, just to grade that seam a little bit, which will make it a little easier when you come to top stitching. If you haven't used faux leather at all for any of it, then you probably don't need to grade the top unless you feel that your machine will struggle. I tend to only do major grading at the top if I've used faux leather. When I say grading, I mean cutting one side longer than the other so that you've got a bit of a staggered length. It just takes the bulk out of it when you turn it through and press the top for top stitching, which is the thing that most people struggle with, top stitching, because it's always quite bulky. I do have some videos in my bag making hints and tips folder on a playlist on YouTube for helping with bulky seams and such like. So if that's something that you have an issue with, please do go over and have a little look. Lots and lots of ideas for new and experienced bag makers, because every day's a school day, we're always learning, me included. So I've removed my basting stitches, and now let's just go along and remove that foam from the seam allowance. Funny when you look at the inside of a bag, it's difficult to imagine how beautiful it's going to be on the outside when you look at the inside, because you're actually looking at the workings when you're looking at this point, which I actually think is fascinating. And I wonder if people who don't make bags would be interested to see this, to look at this and think, oh, that doesn't look great, does it? So I'm just going to pop that back through because it's come out. It's not the end of the world at this point, because you still have access inside. So I'm going to go, having removed all those basting stitches and the foam, I'm just going to go in through the hole in the bottom of the lining, and I'm going to put my hand in there, push my bag into my hand. So I'm kind of got hold of it, and that looks a bit like something out of a scary Muppet show. And I'm just going to ease that, the exterior of my bag, back through that hole in the base of my lining. The handles will be coming, the flap will be coming. It does take a little bit of time, but it's not impossible. Just take it slowly. There's no need for swearing, and there's absolutely no need for an epidural, although there have been occasions when I've thought that. And then I hold the bag between my knees, which is entirely appropriate for this process. I'm going to pull the handle to the front. I'm going to push out the bottom. If my straps have come out, which one has, I'm just going to pop it back through from the inside, because I can. At the moment I still have access. Everything is, I've got a couple of threads that don't belong right there. Oh, I don't know where they've all come from. Let's get rid of them. Poking out the bottom, making sure the corners are sitting nicely. And you can do all this with your hand inside without any bother at all. Just shape it with your hands. Really happy with the way that looks. And then I can push my lining back into the bag. And I'm not going to seal anything up just yet. I'm just going to, lots and lots of bits of thread. I'm going to take that facing panel and I'm going to roll it back into the bag, and the facing panel needs to be sitting right inside, so the seam between the two needs to be just fractionally towards the lining. And I say fractionally, I'm talking about perhaps a 1/16 of an inch. Just roll it with your fingers and then pop a clip in. Roll it with your fingers and pop a clip in. I'm going to go all of the way around that top edge, rolling. Bits of thread sticking out. You kind of breed little bits of thread. We certainly do when I'm sewing. I chop off one and I end up with 4. I don't know where they all come from. Now, if you've got really thick seams at the corners here, you can give them a little whack with a rubber mallet if you think that they're going to be difficult to stitch across. But they shouldn't be too bad because your lining seam is actually in the middle and not lined up with the corners of the bag. Right, there we go. Now I'm going to turn my bag, what colour have I've got on my bobbin? I believe I have black. Actually, that will be okay, I don't mind that. I'm going to top stitch my bag, but I top stitch from the inside in the same way as I did before because I've got a flatbed. So if you're going to do that, you must make sure that you've got your flap and your handle out the way. You don't want to be stitching over those. And I'm going to make sure I've got a long thread at the beginning and the end so I can bury and tie off, because again we don't want to see any back stitching. So I'm just going to literally stitch all the way around the top of the bag. Again, seam allowances are in the pattern. No back stitching at the beginning and the end, so we're just going to taking off my clips as I go. And again, pulling the bag round so that I'm in charge, it's not. All the way around the top. And again, I'm using a size 16 universal needle here. Often people talk about top stitching and say, oh, my machine's not coping, I can't get through things, I'm going to need an industrial. This is not the case. If you use the right needle, the appropriate needle, and an appropriately sized needle, you shouldn't have any problems top stitching. Just keep going until you get back to the point where you started. Try and land in the same hole as you started in if you can. If not, then as close as possible. When you get to the end, pull your work out, and you should have 2 threads on the outside, 2 threads on the inside, and excuse me, if you take the threads from the outside through the last hole to the inside. And I usually start my stitching on the back, so it's kind of underneath the flap, so it's not too much of a major issue. Now, I like to do a couple of knots here. You can just bury them and then knot them on the inside if you prefer, but I'm always a little bit wary of that. So I tend to do a couple of knots on the inside, which actually you can't see once you've buried your threads. And then take the threads. Actually, you can get all 4 through there. Pop my hand into that pocket. Look, sorry, I'm not even facing the right way. So I've pulled the threads through from the back to the front, I've tied a knot in, and now I've got all 4 threads through my needle. I'm going to put my hand into the pocket so that I can get in behind, and I'm just going to put those threads back through there, and the needle comes out inside of the pocket, so the threads are now all kind of caught between the lining and the exterior. So we'll push everything in, make sure everything fits as it should do before we make any more radical moves to close anything up. Everything looks super. I'm delighted with that. So I'm now going to put my hand into my pocket, and I'm going to feel around for the bottom of my lining, and I'm going to pull the lining, the bottom of the lining back through the pocket, and you can see that we have that. It doesn't have to come fully through. That piece in the lining where we left that gap to turn our bag through. Now I'm just going to pop a few clips on there. And I'm going to stitch that up. So I'm stitching the hole in the bottom of the lining. Except for my threads just come out. So I'm not stitching anything. Let's just rethread, shall we? So I'm starting my stitching just probably a quarter of an inch before where I actually finish my stitching. So I'm just overlapping by approximately a quarter of an inch. And I'm going all the way along to join up with the start of the stitching on the other side of that opening. And I'm overlapping by about a quarter of an inch. Couple of stitches, back stitches to secure my stitching, trim off the threads, and then I can pop that lining back in through the pocket, through the interior pocket. I just push my hands in to push everything in, and now the only aperture we need to sort out is the one that's at the bottom of the pocket. So I pull the pocket linings out, and we did that lovely fold on the bottom, so we should have a nice neat edge to be able to stitch. So I'm just going to clip those two folded edges together, and that's why we did that small hem at the bottom of the pocket linings. It just makes it so much tidier when you get to this point. Now you can stitch this by hand if you prefer. I know by the time I've got to this end of making a bag, the willingness to do anything by hand has really left me completely. And I always just go do it with a machine. I don't know anybody that inspects the bottom of a pocket. I don't think I've ever inspected the bottom of a pocket in any bag, either one I've made or one I've bought. Answers on a postcard if you do. But I just run along the bottom of the pocket using an 1/8 inch seam allowance, and it's fine. I think it works just perfectly. All the way along. And a couple of back stitches just to secure those threads. You can pop that lining back into the pocket and push the corners down. Pop your lining back into your bag. Do your zipper up. You can press your bag. Be careful if you've used faux leather. Press the lining if you need to. Give the whole thing a good finish off so that it looks nice and smart. And then we have to look at our buckle. So I'll be back to show you how we do that in a second.